Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the African Mining Summit today. Today we're going to have a discussion about coal and the coal panel. I have a number of distinguished guests who are going to join the panel today and to participate in this very important discussion. We're very privileged to be here still and to have this platform and this opportunity to discuss this important topic. The virtual platform has been exceptionally useful and enabled ongoing and constant communications through the pandemic, which has enabled facilitation of an industry that continues to move forward and develop. The coal industry, of course, is one that's extremely controversial in the current global climate related to climate change policy driven at high levels politically, and also the associated environmental and social governance issues within the industry has massively affected companies, both existing operators, but in particular the emerging companies, the junior companies, the developers. And today, well, I'm sure we will have some interesting perspectives from the panel members. Before we start, I'd like to introduce this distinguished panel members that I have today, a very experienced group of people involved across various aspects of the value chain. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mr. Xavier Provost, who, like myself, is one of the ancient people who's been involved in this industry for more than 40 years. Xavier is both an engineering geologist and also has an mining engineering qualification from Wits University. He's pretty much been in the coal industry for as long as I can remember, since the mid-70s. When I started in the gold and coal mines with the Goldfields Group. He's got a distinguished career being involved with the Geological Survey, the National Coal Database, was an exploration manager with the Genmin Group, and was with the Minerals Bureau and the DME since 1995 as a mineral economist, and he's probably the most distinguished of the coal mineral economists that we have in the industry today. He's consulted extensively for the coal operators and companies, as well as the analyst companies such as Wood Mackenzie, and has been at the forefront in the development and adoption of clean coal technologies. So we're very pleased to have Xavier with us today. Further, we have Resources, one of the emerging coal operators and developers in Botswana. He is a metallurgist experiencing operations and project development management in a diverse set of mining projects. He's been a director of a number of listed companies, and he's the founder of or co-founder of Matla Resources, and we're very pleased to have Jacques here with us today. We then have Morné du Plessis with us, who's the CEO of another Botswanan emerging producer in the growth phase, Minergie Limited, listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange. Morné is an accountant by trade and has been involved across the mining industry for quite a number of years, and involved in particular in the development of junior coal miners, and was with Westcoal Holdings, which of course was the initiators of Minergie Limited, and was CFO in 2017 before being appointed CEO of the current company. We're very pleased to have Morné with us today. Thank you. And then last but not least, we have Louis Loubser, who's another management accountant by trade, but strangely decided to get an open pit mining certificate. Don't know what drove him to do that. And he also has an MBA. Louis was a senior executive with the Afrimat Group, and joined Moyplats as a CEO in 2018. So he's been there for the last 3 years. Welcome to you also, Louis, to the panel today. So obviously myself, I didn't introduce myself. I think I'm fairly well known to all of you, have been with the African Mining Summit and the GRV, the organizer, since its inception 7 years ago. Obviously extremely passionate about the subject matter and development of the mining industry in Africa. And it's been a great pleasure to partner with GRV and the African Union Commission in taking this event from what started as a small event 7 years ago with about 40 attendees and delegates to the position we are today, which is in the hundreds of delegates and interested parties and sponsors involved in this event. So yeah, it's a great pleasure for me to continue to be involved. Maybe I've been in the industry for more than the last 4 decades, and I've worked globally in the coal industry across the planet, as well as all other commodities. So yeah, I don't think it's need for me to say any more about myself. So without further ado, I would like to start off by putting I think a question to the panel, and we can get a perspective from each of the panel members. And the first one really would be about coal as a fuel, as an energy fuel, and given the current environment, which has continued to gain momentum, with the focus being on green, predominantly focused on carbon emissions and the reduction thereof, and blaming coal as public enemy #1 for this. I'd like to get the perspective from the panel on around the subject of greening coal. How do we make green coal? Is it possible to make green coal? And if so, what are the strategies that we might apply to do that? So if I may, I'd like to start with the comments from you, Xavier, on this key subject.
Okay. I actually done a couple of articles on the subject, and recently we published in some of them. The reason why I want to start like this is it looks that I'm starting at the end, but I think in this case, the end is the beginning, is this idea that people have, especially in the industry, and some of the politicians also are talking about a global energy transition. And they're talking a transition in the sense of moving away from coal into renewables. Now, the industry that I work with has the transition idea too. But our idea of transition is not moving away from coal into renewables. The idea is to move from dirty coal into clean coal. And clean coal, I can explain that in detail, but it's going to take a couple of hours. It's about using coal in a clean manner, using coal with the new technologies that allows you to cut down emissions and improve the efficiency or the thermal efficiency of power plants. In other words, what some years back, I was sent to the agreement on clean coal science at the IEA by the government, South African government. And there was a lot, sort of motto that we had in the organization. And it said simply, clean coal science is just about thermal efficiency. That's all. So in other words, is if you are managing to burn your coal cleanly and use all the carbon in the coal in a way that less CO2 escapes from the furnace, that is the essence of clean coal technologies. Now, to explain clean coal technologies in a couple of minutes is a bit difficult, but I've got a small write-up about it that if you people want to hear about, it's fine. Now, we're talking now, because we're living in South Africa, we're talking about the South African environment. And in South Africa, energy transition has created a huge problem for the producers. And Jax will support me on this. Money that was supposed to be available to create or to open new mines is not available anymore. It's not available because the financiers, the people that are planning to invest money in coal mining, are saying, is there a future in coal? Because if governments are talking about a certain date for zero emissions and this and that, then maybe it's a bad idea to invest money in coal mining. Now, because of saying that, our projects, new projects and new mines are now lacking capitals that we need to increase and to develop more production. And because of the lockdown in last year in April, we've lost a huge amount of production of some of the mines that closed down and couldn't reopen. I think one of the members of the panel is or was part of Westcoal, and Westcoal is one of the worst hit companies in that time. And not just Westcoal, but many others, including the coal mining company of government, has suffered the same effects, that the markets dwindle, the prices drop, and suddenly the mines could not be anymore made efficient in the sense that they were making money. And that, coupled with what we have here in South Africa called the coal cliff. The coal cliff was supposed to be, we expected it to happen in the year 2020. But I suspect the coal cliff started in South Africa in the year 2018. And since then, large mines stop production or decrease production. And on couple on that we didn't expect that to happen, a number of the majors have left the country. And that also has affected the production of coal in South Africa. Now, without the support of capitals, either foreign capitals or local capitals, to open new mines, small or large, we are suffering now a decrease in production that started last year and it's become worse this year. And now we actually having a bumper year as far as exports are concerned, because the export price has increased and increased and increased and is still increasing today. And we're reaching highs that we never expected. They say that coal price is now the highest in 13 years. So it's actually a very, very good time to export. That our export capacity is being dwindled by the fact that the mines are not producing enough coal. And also that Transnet has been suffering from a lack of efficiency due to a number of incidents happened during this last couple of months in the coal line. So all that has made very difficult for us to move coal to the terminal and also sell it from the terminal. So it's a very, very critical.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting me. If I may just bring the subject matter back to the greening aspect. I mean, all these points you brought up are extremely valid, and I'm sure we're going to address them as we go through the panel. Just to come back to the greening aspect and the clean coal technologies. I mean, you mentioned specifically that, you know, the key is thermal efficiency, and therefore the key is in the boiler technology and how we actually burn the coal. Do you have any specific comments around that, about the availability of that technology? Does that mean that a coal producer needs somehow to link their operations to a clean coal plant that's burning coal in a clean way in order to, you know, make their business sustainable? How do you see that manifesting itself and linking itself with, you know, with the operators, with the pure producers that don't have power plants, for example?
Okay, As I say, the business of clean coal is rather complex. It's difficult to explain quickly and in a few words, but let us say, first of all, the most important thing is you have to analyze the nature of the coals, because here in South Africa and the rest of the world, I'm sure it's the same. We have different types of coal, different collieries, different coal fields, different areas. Some of them are high in fixed carbon, others are lower. Some are high ash and others are not. So in general, what I say we should do is first analyze the nature of these coals that we're going to use and see that the methods, the technologies we're going to use in this particular case, in this mine, is compatible with the coal that we have. And because we have variable qualities in our coals, we need to beneficiate the run of mine that comes from the mine to ensure the best desirable qualities. In other words, is even before we start using that coal, we need to know exactly how far we can go in the washing plant, in the beneficiation, to make that coal suitable for certain processes. And some processes, as I say, have to do with the boilers. The boilers need to be optimized to accept this type of coal and use it optimally. But in other cases, it's not about boilers, because as you probably know, here in South Africa, we use coal for everything. So coal goes out of the mine and goes into the industry. Now, what the industry is going to do with that coal depends on entirely what industry you're dealing with. And you have, of course, a typical example of doing other things than burning coal is Sasol, where coal is, instead of being burned, is gasified and it's used as a hydrocarbon. That hydrocarbons will be then eventually used to create chemical compounds that Sasol sells, and also liquid fuels. So as I say, it's a very intense, very difficult process to convert coal into clean coal technologies into a suitable fuel that the other people, the enemies of the industry, will accept and say, yes, in this case, clean coal is all right, because the idea has also been used by people not very happy with the industry that clean coal technologies is just a word, that clean coal technologies doesn't make coal clean, it just makes it a little bit cleaner than before. In other words, the emissions are still the same and emissions will affect the environment. So this is roughly what I can say about clean coal. As I say, we can go deeper into it, but it will take longer.
No, it's not necessary here. I think that's a good base for me to really put another perspective and pass it on for comment to the other panel members as small miners and emerging producers and producers. I mean, just drawing a parallel, if you like, with the nuclear industry. We all know how nuclear has been badly hit because of the pushback against nuclear power. And to some degree, we're experiencing the same in coal, a different context, but also really risk-based. In the coal space, the risk is carbon emissions. In the nuclear space, the risk is nuclear pollution, etc., etc. So similar parallel. Now, what's happened in the nuclear industry, or what is happening, is that there's this move, one, because of fundability, and two, because of the risk, to also different technologies. For instance, they're now moving to SMRs, the small modular reactors. And of course, South Africa was a global leader with the pebble bed modular reactor, which ultimately shut down for many reasons, political and otherwise. But we led the world for years in that technology. And today, the small modular reactors is becoming the technology deployment for nuclear of the future, because it's so much easier to distribute and to use and to build. I mean, 150 megawatt SMR, from a capital perspective and from an ability to build is so much more palatable for companies and even regional utilities and small utilities than a big, let's say a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or even a 5 gigawatt nuclear plant that can cost, 30-40 billion dollars. So from the coal perspective, what I would maybe put forward is that perhaps the potential for us as small miners to capture the value chain fully, to extract value for our shareholders and for our stakeholders, is that we align power generation, baseload power generation at small scale, could be as low as 150 megawatts, with our mines in a fully integrated way, where we can then use what Xavier is suggesting. We apply proper analysis of our coal, we apply clean coal technology within the boiler, within the power plant, and we can contribute to this massive negative or power deficit we have specifically in the Southern African power pool region of now 40 gigawatts and increasing. We can contribute to that. So more on a more integrated basis, rather than just building a mine and trying to sell the coal, but burn the coal in a clean way in a small power plant connected with the mine. What do you think about that as a basis for going forward, Jacques?
Alan, yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think we as coal producers or future coal producers need to put on a different hat and not only focus on producing coal to different end users, but we need to try and look at actually developing clean coal technologies and looking at downstream value chains with regards to coal to liquids, stuff like fertilizers, and even maybe looking at recovering other critical metals out of waste coal streams and so forth. Technology is there. It's just obviously with regards to funding is a problem, because it's coal based. The funding across the board, even down the value chain, is an issue. So from that perspective, I think as well, we as coal producers need to get in production, utilize cash flow, invest ourselves in these different types of green coal technologies, and obviously carbon capture and all the other aspects associated with it, and diversify. So generate more revenue out of these products, and by doing so, actually open the door with regards to showing the rest of the world and educating them that it can be done, and there's examples of it. People don't want to look at the Sasol's of the world as an example in terms of the value chains, but why can't that be done in other developing countries? So yeah, I fully agree. We as producers need to look at that in terms of doing it ourselves, because we're not going to get external funding from that in terms of actually developing it.
Sorry, guys. Morné, what's your feeling about this subject?
Hi, Alan. It's a difficult one. When you start up a mine, you're barely in the environment that we operate with the constraints we have. You barely see the wood from the trees, and these type of goals for the future, is very important. So we support a diversification of your income base. Doesn't matter from what perspective it comes. Maybe it is the small power station that you're speaking about, and the like. But right now, the only thing that you can concentrate on is how do you make your operations a little bit more cleaner, for example. So let's say, for example, when we started the mine, our whole business model was based on making use of diesel generators because there was no electricity in the area. Okay, so that has its own complications. So, we've assisted and contributed to putting electricity into the mine, albeit coal-based. So, that's one step. Is there a way that you can decrease your carbon footprint? Of course. And I think that's where some of the challenges lies for some of the smaller operators. It's all good and well to have a greater plans going forward, but as Jacques has mentioned, you need to get into production and you need to get your cash flow sorted out before you can, let's say, readjust your strategy to attend to the greener issues. And you can attend to it right now in your operational phase by just decreasing your footprint. So from our perspective, we look at the longer vision in terms of supporting the greener technologies. I think we must be aware especially in the market that we're selling, the size coal market, that, how are these industries also going to change? It's all good and well for us to want that to happen, but how do you tell a cement producer change the way that you dry your cement, or how they burn it in their boiler? So it's a bigger discussion, and it's not just us as a producer saying that we want to do something else. So I think it's a wider discussion. But we, as I said, right now, one should focus on doing what you do, creating the lesser footprint.
Louis, from your perspective, Mooiplaats, what's your view?
Yeah, not necessarily for Mooiplaats, but I think speaking on behalf of the industry as a small or mid or junior miner, we've engaged a third party in terms of the South African legislation. I believe is 100 megawatt that you can self-generate, is to say what options are available. I assume the capital cost or the price tag of equipment is the same for everyone. But I think the difference is being a small or financially prudent small operation, you can probably allocate the capital better than the big mining houses, and also trying to find a solution for the millions and millions of tons of coal fines that's available. Well, no one has found the solution, but we are evaluating it by virtue of trying to pre-treat the fines to generate, to get rid of the moisture, etc., and try and be as efficient as possible. I think that scenario is available. The difficulty is we need stakeholder involvement. I think, as Jacques Walmers has pointed out, to fund this all on your own balance sheet, if you are a small operator, regardless of who you are, you need the assistance. And I think that assistance from stakeholders with the whole ESG drive in mind is probably more valuable assisting in a transition for the next 20 to 30 years than saying, good luck, you're on your own, and we don't want coal in any form. I think, as Xavier has pointed out, how do we get that fixed carbon up? How do we be as efficient as possible over the transition period? Because in my mind, there is no renewable solution currently that we can switch off coal. So it's a bit of a fairyland where you say, I'm going to switch over, like Germany does, but then they buy all their nuclear power from France, or they buy their coal power from Poland. So it's a bit of smoke and mirrors in terms of the transition. It would be better for all stakeholders in the industry, even the banks included, to try and assist smaller role players to find alternative solutions.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, Germany is definitely an example of how not to do it. I mean, it's a physical fact that Germany's actually restarting and reopening open pit coal mines to restart their coal-fired power plants, because the cost of energy has, exponentially increased since they shut everything down and tried to go renewable, that it's made it, it's affected their exporting of goods, because of the input costs of goods has gone through the roof. Because as we know, energy is the basis of just about everything in the world today. And if the cost of energy escalates, then it naturally inflates everything else. So a very good point. And perhaps that's a point of departure for us to think about. I mean, my view is becoming more and more, also as a coal developer in Shumba, and what we're trying to do. I mean, we have, of course, a number of projects. We also have the coal mines, but then we have the coal to liquids project, the project Ikagang that we're trying to get off the ground in Botswana. And what I'm finding is that the biggest issue is really one of scale. So I think there's probably a sound basis for companies like Matla, like Minergie, like Shumba, like Moy, to really put everything to our heads together in some way, some form of cooperative or coordinate, in order to give us more firepower with funders and to develop a strategy, a fully integrated value chain strategy to capture clean coal technologies, to be able to build integrated baseload mine and power generation units, maybe of 150 megawatts. And just to comment on that, what you mentioned about the unregulated ability now to build a 100 megawatt facility in South Africa. The government has now allowed that. It's unfortunately not at a very good level for coal-fired units, because pretty much the optimum module for a coal-fired power plant today is around 150 megawatts. 100 megawatt unit, you can build it, but it is, from a capital perspective and an operating cost perspective, quite significantly negative compared to 150 megawatt, which is more or less an off-the-shelf unit you could import from Germany or China. There's many in Germany just standing, built, ready to export to anywhere in the world. So then that you would obviously have to get permission for if you were in South Africa. So there's perhaps some further discussion with government needed to be had there in order to facilitate that. But I think, yeah, we need a more coordinated approach towards government, towards regulation, towards the funding community, when we talk about, you know, how we can sustain our industry. I don't know what you're feeling about that, Xavier.
Yeah, actually, when you mention the small plants and mines tied up to plants, the concept, I didn't want to talk about that because that's not clean coal technologies per se, but it's some older concept that we have tried to achieve here in South Africa. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to replace some of the power generated by Eskom by small plants and small mines. And that concept is widely used overseas, and it's called the IPPs, Independent Power Producers. And we have studied the economics of them. I have a client mine that has done all the studies. They even managed to get a boiler proposed to them, and looking at all the costs of mining, concentration, and then the use of the power station, small power station, to provide extra power to Eskom was perfectly right. The economics work well, and the cost of generation in this case, as you mentioned before, was cheaper than the cost that Eskom had. So it was all perfect. And in a couple of cases in South Africa, projects have been launched and have been studied and then been proposed to the regulator, which is NERSA. But unfortunately, the licenses that were supposed to be given didn't happen. And the main reason for that was, again, the environmental issue, because the Department of Environmental Affairs opposed heavily to this project. And we landed up in square one. We couldn't do anything. But for me, the solution in this country and solution for Eskom and for power generation is IPPs. I believe we should go, and we need to go into IPPs, because the amount of coal in the ground that can be used for those people is immense. And as Louis said, some of that coal, not necessarily good quality coal, it could be fines, could be duff that we're using, but the result is that the power generation unit not only uses this low quality cheap coal, but also prevents emissions because of the technologies involved in this type of applications. And again, that is clean coal technologies. So, you know, that would be the ideal thing to do.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I'm glad Louis and you again now have mentioned this issue of residues. Obviously, our industry has left a huge legacy of residues out there. And if we can repurpose those in a clean manner, then certainly that goes towards greening coal. I mean, I am involved in other projects where there's some emergent technologies in terms of extremely high intensity magnetic separation, where one can upgrade coal fines and coal tailings massively. I've seen some recent results on test work done that was quite astounding. I mean, we're talking about magnetic separators that are using Gauss levels of 20, 24, 25,000, which is, 3 to 4 times what's the typical high intensity magnetic separator. And most coals, because of the associated minerals, have some magnetic properties. They're paramagnetic, so you can upgrade them with a WIMS unit. And then additional to that, once you've done that, you can then bring to bear other technologies such as agglomeration technology, which can then produce a pellet, a pellet with a high mechanical integrity that you can then burn in a fluidized bed situation in a clean coal technology boiler. So I think the technology are there, they're available, and we need to create a forum where we can put this together and create what's effectively a blueprint, if you like, for clean coal technology deployment in the small mine and small power plant scenario. What do you feel about that, Jacques? You agree?
I fully agree. No, I fully agree, and that's obviously part of our long-term strategy as well. You need to actually put the example down on the ground for everybody to see and change the mindset, and not only from within the industry, but also from with regards to the financial sector in terms of supporting these type of projects.
Yeah. Morné?
Yeah, I'm on board with that, especially on the repurposing of some of the residue. And, in terms of longer term, we are looking at our fines, which is obviously byproducts coming out. So, excited about that. And I think that's the way that you, change the narrative around coal. So, in the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And another aspect, of course, is coal. Something that I recall recently after some work done quite a number of years ago is that quite a lot of our coals in South Africa actually have quite significant uranium content or uranium associated with them. And if one burns the coal, the ash that comes out of the coal is actually, to a large degree, quite rich in uranium, relatively speaking. So there's also a potential there for reutilizing ash from existing coal-fired power plants and others in order to repurpose that ash and in order to recover the U3O8 and at the same time then from the ash use it in secondary industry. So I think there's no shortage of roadmaps or routes for us to operate. I think we, as an industry, we really need to put our heads together and put these things down and formalize them and start. Maybe we need to start lobbying the funders out there for this new blueprint to green coal. And maybe that's something we can agree on in this panel that we would going forward, we should actually do. Because I'm sure the funders would be amenable to that. I certainly have been talking to a number of funders, different types of funders, private equity funders who make big ticket investments and are not necessarily negative towards baseload power and coal or baseload power from coal when you talk about all these factors which they were unaware of. So I think as an industry, we're not doing a very good job in about communicating what the opportunities are for repurposing and let's say rebranding our industry in terms of its contribution to aspects of the carbon economy and greening in general. Louis, will you agree with that premise?
Maybe delete the next sentence, but I get repurpose the residue is quite a high technical term for a guy as operational as me. Okay, guys, you can record again. But I think in terms of repurposing the residue, you need the stakeholder bank private equity assistance. And I think if you want to be responsible, it's easy to jump on the bandwagon like Germany and go against coal and then silently start regenerating. If you want to be responsible, rather partner with someone like the Matlas of the world, the Shumbas of the world, as a stakeholder and say, you need R&D, you need additional investment for us to turn this around. And again, I point out in my mind, it's going to take us 20, maximum 30 years to have the transition, but all players need to be responsible and partner instead of shunning coal to one side and say, I don't want to speak to you, is to try and help them find proper solutions, exactly what you're stating now with the magnetic separation and stuff like that. It's obviously capital intensive, and for that to be effective or successful, a rollout in South African context, we need help from whatever industry we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to talk about the funding, the future funding for a minute. I mean, I don't know what your recent experiences are talking to funders. It would be interesting to hear from the group about your relative experiences. What's your experience been recently, Jacques?
I think it hasn't changed in the last 2 years. Obviously, there's a limited amount of cash available for new projects. I think largely, like I've previously said as well, is that the funding will come from within the coal industry. So stakeholders such as off-takers, OEMs, mining contractors, plant contractors, they will be providing the funding, for new projects. And then obviously you need to have look at your cash flow, look at your project, be efficient as possible, and then obviously develop your future projects from your own cash flow. Certainly, talking to various funders, definitely in the Western world, the doors are closed. Within South Africa, the doors are closed, in my opinion, but there's definitely Asian and developing countries banks that are amenable in terms of funding new projects. And that's where we're basically looking in terms of getting our debt funding from as well. So hopefully before the end of the year, we're very positive that we will have a financial close before the end of the year.
No, that's good news. Yeah, I agree that the funding nexus really now for our industry is very much swung to the east. So it's very much, I would say, China and Southeast Asia centric. So yeah, I would agree with that. Although there are still some Western private equity funds that I've managed to uncover that are interested in coal propositions that are, let's say, encapsulate the full value chain. So if you're just trying to fund a coal mine, you can forget about it. But if you're trying to fund an integrated coal business that has the energy fuel guaranteed, the power plant end that can sell into the baseload power market, and or secondary industries such as a coal to liquid production plant that can produce not only liquid fuels, but also byproducts that can serve the hydrogen industry, such as the aromatics that come out of a CTL plant. And you can then get into the liquid organic hydrogen carrier market and things like that. So it's about, I think, broadening the value chain and how the project definition is, and then you can get more traction. And there are some very big equity funders still in the West that are amenable to that type of picture. That's been my experience to share with you as a group. Morné, what's your guys' recent experience been in Minergie and of course talking from a Westcoal perspective, you may know as well. How are you doing on the funding side?
Yeah, so like Jacques said, nothing has changed. It's actually got worse. Traditional funding avenues are closed. People speak about a just transition. There's no just transition with the financiers and insurers. They've cut that off immediately. So, where's the justice in that? But let's not debate that. I'll cry on somebody else's shoulder later. But what you then have to do is you look at additional avenues and alternatives. And Jacques is right. You'll have to look at your value chain, vendor financing, looking at your box cut being funded by a mining contractor, prepayments from your customers. You're going to have to look at those type of mechanisms. But we've been fortunate, and it's come from government, because government's got a different view, and that helps. If we were in Germany, we would have never been able to open a coal mine. Botswana does have more than 200 billion tons of coal available. The Minister of Mines has come out and said that we all have to be environmentally responsible, but We can't take this God-given resource and cast to the side. So if you've got a partnership that you can strike with government, and they've got the same views, still within the confines of doing it responsibly, environmentally friendly, and so forth, that helps. So in our instance, we've had the positive response of getting assistance from government, seeing the value that the economy of Botswana needs to diversify, and with coal being in abundance, I think that's the way that they're going with it. So that's helped us. There is, I believe, also opportunities in the East, as you guys have mentioned. They are less sensitive to, let's say, most of these issues that's been put on the table. And I still believe that in the Western world, you'll still find a niche investor that will invest in a coal mine, irrespective of the downstream applications. Some investors still look at the good old, what is my return on my investment? And if you look at the good old days, most of the big funds made all their money out of some coal mine. So, some guys are still going to do that. You must find the right guys, the guys that are less sensitive. The big investors and the sovereign funds have obviously pulled out. You can't go and knock on their door. So it makes your job a bit more interesting, and that it is not easily available. But I believe those avenues are there. But you have to look across the spectrum. Where in the past it was easy, you go down the road and go speak to a bank manager. You're not even allowed in the bank anymore. So the long and the short is we look at what we've got, and you look at those alternatives.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the issues that potentially is going to play into our favor, well, actually, I believe it will and is starting already, is I believe the pendulum has started to swing back. We have gone through a tough time the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I think this was to, a significant degree exacerbated by this pandemic that we've gone through as well. But at the same time, I think certain people that are delivering the political ultimatums and the NGOs and people that are saying, oh, we will be green, by 2030 and we'll be net carbon neutral by 2050. I think, they're absolutely delusional. And I think they're starting to realize that the simple fact of the matter is that if you understand this industry, like I do, having been in it for more than 40 years globally, there simply aren't enough materials available to produce the solar panels, the wind farms, the electric vehicles, the battery storage units to support transmit and transfer and produce renewable power at baseload level. There's just not enough nickel, copper, cobalt, lithium, vanadium, doesn't matter what you're talking about. There simply is not enough material. And more than that, even if we had the material and the deposits already discovered, the capital has not been there for it. I mean, depends who you talk to today, whether it's the World Bank or the IMF, or IFC, EBRD, they've all recently published numbers saying that, well, the industry needs anywhere between 1.5 and 3.5 trillion dollars of new investment to generate the raw materials to become net carbon neutral by 2050. What they also forget is that, and this is not unique to coal, this is all commodities, depending on where you are in the world, but for the most part today, because of the political rhetoric, because of the green push, to permit a new mine today, even for a green commodity, let's say, like copper or nickel or lithium for that matter, it can take you 5 years to 7 years just to get the permit to start the mine. Then you've got your feasibility study period, which the financiers want. They've got this very defined process. They want to see a concept, then a pre-feas, then a bankable feasibility, and then you've got to fund it, and then you've got to build it. So whereas when I started in this industry in the mid-70s, you could build a gold mine on the strength of one hole, and you could go to a bank and get the money and build it, or any commodity for that matter. And you could have a mine from discovery to production in less than 4 years. That same time today is anywhere between 15 and 20 years. So if it's going to take you 20 years to get the mines up and running, to produce the materials for you to make renewable energy generation technologies and have them operating in the real world, we're now in 2020. So assuming you found it, that takes you to 2040. You haven't even started yet. So, you know, with these things in mind, it's very clear that baseload power from coal is going to be here for a long, long time to come. And I think certain people are waking up to that fact, and give it another year or two. And I think we're going to be in a position far better than we are now. But we as a group, it's going to be incumbent on us to put the blueprint there, put it forward, put it to the funding groups, and to act more in concert. I think from my perspective, we're all trying to do our thing for our stakeholders and our shareholders, which is great. But we need more cohesion as an industry unit, I think, to put our case and bring reality, I believe, to the funders and the regulators, of course, as we go forward. What do you think about that approach? Xavier, what's your comment, having been very much entrenched and with the DME and then involved with government? What's your perspective? Well,
we've seen something very interesting in the last couple of weeks here in this country, that the CEO of Eskom has given a speech to the effect that Eskom is moving from coal generation into renewables as soon as possible. Then immediately there were two reactions there. One was from Labour saying that they will not allow that. We know that always happens. But the most interesting one was from the Department of Minerals and Energy, that the minister gave a speech to Parliament and said that what Eskom plans to do is total madness, total economic madness. In other words, he's saying, and I think he must have read something somewhere, because there's so much now on the same subject. He's saying that what you just said, what happened to Germany, that doing renewables for the sake of doing renewables without thinking of the impact in the economy of the country is total madness. And he said that will not happen. In other words, he says the Department of Minerals and Energy will oppose Eskom if it wants to do that. And I think that is our view. Our view is not against renewables, but to say that the base power needs to come from coal, because in this country and with our economy here, if we do that differently, and the same applies to Botswana and the rest of Africa, we will be in so much trouble. And of course, the potential power that could come from Europe to assist us is not there. So in other words, our economy is our economy. We have to defend it. We have to keep on going with it. And the reality is, without coal, we have no hope.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else got anything to add to that?
Yeah, Ellen, I think, there lies in the opportunity with regards to all this talk with regards to transition. Yes, everybody's still going to move towards it. I think you're right in saying that some people are waking up to the fact that there's a difference between reality and what your ambitions are. And I think, like Xavier said as well, you need to look at your economy, where you're operating in, the people that work in the industry. But I think there's opportunity here for guys like Morné and them that are already in production. The demand's always going to be there. The demand is actually growing, or will be growing, especially in developing countries in the Asians of the world. And yeah, I think it's a situation that coal's going to be here for a very, very long time. you know, I think also this transition talk will also sustain coal prices, especially in exports, which is a good thing for our industry.
Yeah. Okay. Louis, any comment from you or Morné?
I think from my side, what we are regurgitating, it's not a question of or, but it's the power of and. And maybe a slogan we can push out there in industry is it's coal, the power of and. It's coal and renewable. It's coal and other stuff. It's coal and gas. It's not or. And I think the whole narrative that it's pushed to be a yes-no decision tree, if it's coal, it's no. If it's anything else, it's yes, is foolish. I think you called it ludicrous or absurd or whatever the better word is, but it is. It's the power of and I think for guys to be real leaders and thought leaders is not to go with the mainstream, but to support alternative way of thinking and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to support coal in generating additional electricity and finding solutions for the millions of dumps lying around and solving environmental problems. I think well, to date, I've not met anyone in coal that's not passionate about the environment and cares about the earth. Myself, I'm a passionate environmentalist, yet I'm in coal mining. So it would be better to work with someone, maybe not me, but someone like me that is passionate about the environment and is looking for a feasible long-term solution, including the livelihood of not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, of millions of people that is dependent on this industry that you want to switch off like a yes-no decision tree because you're sitting in your aircon office in Prague or wherever you are sitting.
No, absolutely. The whole question around the energy balance and the energy mix is absolutely valid. You're right, Lou. It's definitely a coal and nuclear and renewables and solar hybrid, whatever it is. There certainly is. And I think probably to the I know the South African government's credit, they do have an energy mix based plan. It may be a little ambitious, but yeah, there is a very clear mandate, I think, out there or proposition that declares that there will be an energy mix. And I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely that. And we have to continue to be passionate about cleaning our industry the best we can. Let's utilize the state of the art, the best technologies, whether it's in washing the coal or burning the coal, looking at the integrated value chain, looking at how the footprint impacts on the environment and how it operates within the energy mix. I mean, absolutely 100%. I agree with that. I mean, Morné, you mentioned about, you had to have, diesel power to power your mine, and then you were looking at using, the base load from the grid and so on. I came across something, I think it was last week, about some new coal mines that's going to be built, and well, actually they are being built in Southeast Asia. They're actually going to power their mines. It's quite interesting. They're balancing their carbon position by using solar power to power the coal mine, which is quite interesting. So I think there again, it's innovative. It's balancing their perceived or calculated carbon emissions by doing that. I did note, however, that they were a little sketchy on their carbon balance sheet, and I think this is also the problem with the understanding of renewables instead of coal. If you look on a megawatt for megawatt basis, compare a centralized solar array plant, for example, compared with a megawatt of coal-fired power using modern approaches and technologies, then on a megawatt for megawatt basis, the solar power plant, in order to establish it and do it, has actually got a higher carbon footprint than the coal-fired power plant. And I think it's that type of full carbon accounting and balance that's going to be important for us as coal developers and coal operators, that to engage with. There are a number of consultants out there now that are doing this type of important work for us to be able to show, well, this is the true, carbon balance sheet of our business, and this is our intent going forward to mitigate that in terms of overall ESG reporting and how we're going to change the perception of our industry. I think that's something that we can do now and we need to do. What about you, Jacques? Are you looking at something like that in Martla?
Well, we're not considering a solar farm to generate the power for the mine, but obviously we've got plans in place in terms of long-term, in terms of reducing our overall carbon footprint and hopefully being able to have a neutral carbon footprint in terms of some of the technologies we want to apply. But that's quite far down the line. We need to get into production, generate revenue, and then basically convince our proposed funders in terms of downstream projects with regards to getting these different products from coal, and show them the benefit in terms of the business plans.
What about you, Morné? Do you have a carbon balance sheet for the current business or moving forward? Is it something you've looked at?
Look, as a startup mine, we don't refer to a balance sheet because it's completely skewed. So we don't even have a proper balance sheet, so never mind a carbon balance sheet. But the long and the short is, I think there's a responsibility, Alan, on us. I mean, the one thing that's quite clear to me in listening to the fellow panelists here is that we've actually got an opportunity here to manage our coal mines a little bit differently than in the past. In the past, we could do what we probably wanted to, and the greenies didn't care about what we were doing. We are very much in the forefront. Maybe we've been our own worst enemy. But I think, the power maybe lies in the way that we communicate what we're doing, the opportunities that the panel has highlighted. So, one mustn't shy away from that and say, listen, I'm just going to try and set up a coal mine and hope for the best. We have to carefully manage the way we come across to our stakeholders. And that's how we gain friends. At the moment, the coal industry, the only friends we've got is, little conversations like we have like this, the Coal Association and the like. And we need to get people across like industry to stand on our side and say, like, okay, we understand that there is a responsibility on all of us. What are we going to do about it? The mechanisms to achieve that may differ from mine to mine. Maybe we put a solar up and Jacques doesn't. But there is many technologies out there you can, in terms of beneficiating your product. You've got your air plants, you've got your XRT technologies. All those type of things must be communicated, because I think at coal miners, we don't communicate properly to everybody. And as you said, the narrative about the ESG must be a bit more transparent. We've got nothing to hide. I'm with Louis. I'm also an environmentalist. I don't like to see the earth go to pieces. But, there's a story to be told here, and let's be responsible about it. And I think there's enough technologies and opportunities out there. Let's communicate that people understand what we're trying to do instead of just keeping quiet and feeling sorry for ourselves.
Right. Well, I think, we have in this discussion today created, a solid basis, for us to move forward. There are some, I think, green shoots of reacceptance of coal's positioning within the energy mix. Certainly, it's going to be incumbent on us to push that and propagate it more as a group. And certainly today, I will commit right now to communicating more with you guys and see how we can't coordinate those efforts and focus more on specific areas of funding that I've uncovered and maybe you have, and maybe we can coordinate for the benefit of the industry and the group to push this narrative forward that coal is not bad. And as Louis said, it's coal, and it's very definitely a part of the coal of the industry and the energy mix going forward. And to think otherwise is delusional. No doubt, it's definitely going to be there. There are a number of facts that underscore that. It's not just statements from a group of passionate coal miners. So yeah, gentlemen, I think we've covered our time. So I think it's been a useful discussion. I want to thank each and every one of you for your contribution today for this discussion, and we'll certainly circle back separately and collectively out of this forum and see if we can't put some of these useful ideas together and gain some real traction to the benefit of our industry and all our stakeholders. So thank you very much, guys, for your contribution today. It's been really excellent. And take care and stay safe.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.